Hello everyone on the internet and thanks for tuning in. I'm RyuKiva of RyuKiva Toku.
And welcome to another episode of Toku Bros. I'm your host, the Winter Cosplayer.
A ride to kick the sky turns to take off toward a dream. I think I've messed that up.
You did thoroughly.
It's alright.
Thoroughly.
It's alright. Well, I mean, whatever's done is done because I'll tell you what is done, and that is Kamen Rider 01, the series. We are going to be talking about this series from Ep 1 to Ep 45. And how are you feeling about this?
Well, if anything, I did enjoy the series too. You completely butchered the one of the slogans they use, but still.
We'll talk about the slogan they used right at the end, ironically, because it was right at the end. But okay, but how did you feel about the series overall?
So, just as a quick sum up, I enjoyed it. As a quick sum up, I would say I did enjoy it. Granted, there were the odd episodes here and there that were like a snooze fest or like filler, but nevertheless, by all means, I did enjoy it overall.
See, I mean, alright, so I'm going to kick straight off by saying I disagree with you with the filler thing, but I will get more into that because, well, actually, I'll get into that now. So, like, yeah, I do agree with you that I actually enjoyed the series. It was, I felt really good about it. It was like quite a powerful, energetic series from beginning to end. And the first thing I will sort of like get into detail wise is compared to previous Rider series, I felt that this series was more consistent, constant, and sort of on level from beginning to end. Like, typically, I was just let me finish this at one point. Like, because like the one thing about most Rider series is about halfway through they will have like a change of direction based on public feedback. Whereas I felt, even though they were like, I'm not saying it was exactly the same throughout, but the pacing, the energy, the general story and tone remained fairly consistent, even despite the fact that we had this pandemic hiatus. It was still like something that was very well received from beginning to end, regardless as to what people felt, like in its first inception. So, go on, what did you want to say?
No, I was going to say, I mean, besides it being, like you said, consistent, but I felt two things. One, because this is the first season of the Reiwa series, that there was a bit of
go on.
pressure to it.
But
at the same time, I felt it felt fresh. Like there was something about this that, unlike anything between the Heisei era, this one felt not new, just it felt fresh, if that makes sense.
I get you 100%. I mean, I'll say, I'll talk about the themes that I felt, how I felt about all the various themes, but there was a sort of, to respond to your point specifically, I'd say there was like a lot of rhetoric from riders of old, but yet they still brought it like everything dope is fresh again, is kind of what we say in the urban community. So I felt that they kind of brought a lot of that with it. I mean, especially, like sort of looking at the whole still, I'll still say that where Kamen Rider 01 was supposed to be 49 episodes, but due to the pandemic we had 45, I felt that 4 episode drop actually made the series, and especially the second half, just that little bit sharper. So I actually will say that, if there was any filler, I'd probably say it'd probably be in the first arc, which we'll be talking about shortly. But I'll still say that, especially the second and third arcs, I felt there was virtually no filler.
See, here's the thing. Let me put it this way. Because of, and of course we'll get to this more when we talk about the stories, but as a yes or no question, did you notice how would you call it, a cut in the story, like that kind of how can I say, dramatic cut somewhere in it? That basically, because of the circumstance that's happened and the fact that they had to chop 4 episodes from 49 to 45, did you notice a somewhat cut
I'm gonna mean in your yes no, I'm gonna say no, simply because like if I say I was to watch this in a few years' time, not knowing Rider, and I didn't know that there was a episode reduction due to the pandemic, and I'd watch 45 episodes straight. I genuinely believe, again, it's kind of what I've already said. Like that first arc probably was more about sort of character development, story establishment, but then especially
Mm.
looking at the second story arc, which was the job competition arc, and then even you got the hiatus episode, you got the hiatus specials, then you've got the final arc, which is Arc Zero's arc. I would probably say the pacing of the job competition arc and the Arc Zero arc was virtually identical, and that's like just being retrospective of that. So I wouldn't have noticed it if I didn't know. Would be the answer to your question. Though,
But
talking about it as a whole, and just to sum up the first bit of this, I'll say that the one thing I will say, I mean, again, whether it's down to the pacing, the energy, I will say that this, two words I'm definitely going to be using a lot in this review of Zero One is I felt the series was abstract and I felt it was absurd. And even though we know that Kamen Rider is clearly a work of fiction, I felt that even for a work of fiction, there was a lot of stretches that the writers have made doing Zero One.
assuming you're going to elaborate
I
on
will be
that,
elaborating on that, so don't worry about
because I'm
that.
curious what you mean by that.
I
But
will.
anywho,
Don't worry. I will definitely get into that. So build
no.
up to Kamen Rider Zero One. So this is going off of this time last year. What did you know, and what did you hear, and what did you think once things were revealed?
Okay, so in regards to the build-up, starting off with the just talking loosely about the suit when we first saw the suit reveal, I was like, first in my first initial thought was like, huh, they gone very simplistic, which I like, by the way.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Right, because it's not as elaborate, should we say, like say or flashy, say like or outlandish. So like say in comparison to X-Save, Wizard, or even heck, the upcoming Saber, for instance, those are more outlandish or more flary, no pun intended, towards Saber. But just this one felt rendered, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
They really rendered it, and by all means, as the series progresses, and as we'll talk more, or I'll gush more about the suit, but to start off with, they really contained the main rider. Now, not to say I'm gonna again gush about Vulcan and oh, what's her face?
Valkyrie.
Thank you. Like that's another matter. But anyway, when it comes to also when I heard the sample to the intro as well, I was interested as well. And then I also read I think I read a synopsis and along with the announcement
I
trailer
know
as
the
well.
synopsis you're talking about, and I read that.
Yeah, and also the reveal trailer or two of it as well. So it got me interested in when they were talking about AI and mixing AI with humans as well. And I was interested, so I wanted to go in with some expectation, if you will.
Okay. So, right, so mine's going to be like a massive block. So, firstly, I will say I remember all these fake reveals. So, especially like, oh, this is going to be the first Reiwa rider, da 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 da. Like, I even remember last year actually being in Japan, we'd already had the name revealed Zero One quite early on. But yet, what the guy was going to look like was such massive speculation. And I remember seeing a silhouette with four arms, which I think had been duplicated years before and stuff. But when I saw the real, like, the one that actually turned out to be real, I was like, oh my god, that's hideous. That's very bright yellow. That's how I generally felt about it. But the one thing
Really?
I will say, but the one thing for me, aside from the rumors and the fake
Yeah.
reveals, and was that I saw that genuine suit scan, magazine scan only a couple days before the press conference. So I
Right.
was like, oh, this could still be fake. So it was
Right.
actually, so the one thing for me about Zero One and everything of the build up to episode one is I was fortunate enough to be able to watch the press conference live, streamed via YouTube,
Right.
and I remember doing that this time last year, roughly this time
Right.
last year. So
Yes. Yes.
it revealed, I was just like, all right, so that shit was real. And so I remember seeing the bike as well. Like they had the bike on display. That was kind
Yeah.
of their prominent centerpiece, and that was quite
Yeah.
good to see. But again, I was just like, all right. So, like I kind of felt that way about about the whole neon yellow. But yeah, I will say that they also did reveal Vulcan and Valkyrie at the same time with the scans and on the press conference. And I was like, okay, I'm not too sure how I felt about Valkyrie because I could see that it was getting quite a positive fan response. But me, I'm just like, it was white with like these it was. I mean, the blue face was fine, but the spiky blue around the helmet threw me off a little bit. Whereas with Valkyrie, I did like that white on orange, and there was all that speculation of Valkyrie being female just by the name Valkyrie. But it also took me back to the year prior when everyone was like, oh, Gio's chest plate was quite large. Maybe Gio would be female, but alas, Tokiwa Sogo. But, with Valkyrie, there was that speculation all over again, only this time it did turn out to be, the first female Reiwa rider being in the first Reiwa series. So it was all, like everyone was actually quite happy about that, and at least seeing both Yua and Izu are actually quite smoking hot from that press reveal. I'll say I was also unnerved by that, the backstory you mentioned. I do remember thinking, all right, they've got a comedian, but then where does this whole tech thing play into it? And again, I'm not entirely, and even though this was a year ago and I've got all these vivid memories of watching that press conference live, the one sketchy detail I do have is whether I actually knew at the time that he was going to become the president of like the company, which becomes Hidden Intelligence, or whether I knew that or not. But we knew he was a comedian because they did show like these clips of him telling jokes. But then I think I do remember seeing shots of him in that Hidden Intelligence office. The last thing that I'll say, in this build up is the confusion. Like you mentioned, I'm not sure if you mentioned, but the music for Kamen Rider 01. So during the press conference, they kept playing a song called Find a New Life, which I thought was going to be the OP. But it turned out that this was actually just an insert song, which again, they use a hell of a lot in the series. But the actual OP we got was Realize, done by the guys at TM Revolution. And that was actually, the reason that they didn't use it at the press conference apparently is because they were still recording it before episode, like after the press conference before episode 1 aired. So there was a massive confusion about that. And I actually did like the sound of Find a New Life. And then when I did finally, I remember being played the 01 Realize theme, and I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this because it was, but I will say I grew to like it, and we will sort of start talking about stuff that we, felt as the series went on. So, what did you think of the first few episodes of 01, and what do you remember?
So when it came to the first episode, and it's probably because maybe we're talking this fresh off the bat, but it's one of those that I can still remember that. How can I word it? I like how it's unique, how it's about an inheritance, if you will. How can I word it? And I'm gonna try and not spoil it for the viewers, but I like how rather than your, how can I say, anyone that has a power within them or whatever becomes the next rider, or someone who works at this cafe or whatever, or who works at so-and-so or whatever, gains the rider power. In this circumstance, it is literally an inheritance that our rider, our protagonist, he inherits hidden intelligence from his grandfather, and he gets everything, including the 01 driver as well. And I like that. It is different.
I mean, I guess for my roundup of this, I was probably more like negative about it, if I'm honest. But yeah, like when I mean, like when you the way you say it, it kind of makes sense. But the one thing that I genuinely felt is that the origin story didn't gel with me. I mean, okay, like I get that you got the grandfather who's got hinted intelligence,
Yep.
but then it's like you've got this kind of you've got Aruto who's got this robot father. We kind of get that very vaguely established in the first episode, and they do go on a bit more about it in the first arc overall. But then I kind of feel that there's this kind of gap where it's not like he's being prepped and poised to take on the company after his granddad's passing. He's gone, like, even though he's supposed to have known about his grandfather's company, he's gone off to be like a comedian and stuff.
No.
And then like he's not even aware, even in that first episode, he's just not even aware. Oh right, am I supposed to be inheriting this company? Like my granddad's company, I remember being raised by a robot father, but I've been trying to be a comedian. Yeah, but now that that's kind of fallen apart, I'm now supposed to take over this company. But
here's
go on. I know you're trying to interrupt me, so go on.
No. Yeah, I was gonna say, right. On one hand, granted, he is this comedian, whatever, and then he gets told of the passing of his grandfather and such, and then now he's, if you will, in line to inherit a whole company, and so that's the journey. There is,
well, obviously the journey is over the. I mean, granted, the journey was over the years, so we will be definitely talking about this. I'll be definitely talking about this. I'm still going to say, like, from that inception, like, I'm talking episode 1, the first, watching those first few episodes. Like, when it comes to our protagonist storyline, it's like, how is it? I mean, again, like, obviously, again, I mentioned it at the beginning that this is a work of fiction, but I felt even for a work of fiction, it's stretched. I'm just like, the way that this guy is so clueless, even though he had a Hewwo Gear dad, and I will be talking about the Hewwo Gears in a moment. He has this Hewwo Gear dad, but then he's like, he apparently does have this interest. And again, they establish this interest he's had, but then there's this massive gap from after his Hewwo Gear father died, and then he's been pursuing his own thing, but then he's expected to drop that. But then, at least I do kind of get the messaging, and I will be talking about the philosophy and the sentiment behind this series. But it just kind of, to me, it just kind of feels like a pitfall, and that, they really stretch the boundary of fictitious work in saying, you don't know anything about this company, even though you actually do. And now you're taking it over. Because, like, again, to me, like, again, the point I guess I'm trying to make just before we move on is, like, to me, it'd either be one or the other. It'd either be he completely didn't know anything at all. It's like, oh, your grandfather, who you either didn't know and you knew nothing about his company, has now left this to you. Oh, okay. Or it'd be that traditional, he would have been the, kind of like the vice president story almost, which I'll be talking about the vice president more at the end. But like, it'd be more like it'd either be he didn't know nothing at all, or he was being prepped for it from the beginning of his childhood. But it just seems like they've taken half of one and half the other, and that's kind of mishmash in my opinion.
See, I thought, just to sum my first thoughts was the first few episodes. I liked how can I word it? It just felt different in some way, shape, or form, rather than a protagonist starting with a driver, rather than a protagonist having this sod knows what power within them, I just felt it was more, how can I word it? Flowed, or it was more fresh. Again, I'm going to use
It's
that
still
word again.
fresh, yeah, alright. I'll still mean, like, again, it's definitely unique and original. So, kind of like what you're getting at. I mean, I'm still going to say that, again, it just, to me, it just felt mishmash. And again, I'm just going to, yeah, you might be using the word fresh throughout. I said at the beginning, again, to me, it just felt abstract and absurd. So, again, I mean, especially, like, the way he's always like, and like the way he's making everything a joke, and even when, yeah, and again, obviously he's been a comedian, so if they'd have gone with the comedian thing a bit more kind of established, I'd be like, all right, but then he wasn't even good at that either, to be fair. But the one,
But that was deliberate.
of course, no, I get it, I do get it, but I'm just like, it to me, it just didn't, to me, it just didn't gel at the beginning, and even when you think about it, it's just still abstract, and there's so many of the, so much of his origin story still abstract from beginning to end.
Can I? What do you mean by abstract and absurd?
Like I said, so alright, so this is just the one, this is going to be my first example of a few more that I'm going to be talking about throughout. Alright, example one. Again, this guy is a comedian. He's, and again, bearing in mind, he does actually know that his granddad is the head of hidden intelligence. And, granted, those first few episodes, you see him saying, all right, I don't, and especially in episode one, he's like, all right, I'm definitely not cut out for this. And, they kind of spend like this, whether it's Secretary Izu or whoever else, just kind of like, winning him round to doing this role. And especially like in those early episodes, the vice president was actually quite a sort of, he had quite a weight to him, and he almost seemed like he was going to be a villain. But again, I'll talk about the vice president more right at the end. But like, to me, like, again, the abstract and absurdity is, I mean, they've got this guy who's, he knows about it, but he does, but he's not interested. But then he's wound, he's around to it. But then he keeps these philosophies of the whole leaping towards a dream and making everyone smile. And so again, that's where the abstract thing is. The absurd thing is like, is that even once he's into the role, he's still kind, like just an opinion. Say, I probably said that someone of that kind of character being put in that sort of setting would probably overwhelm them, and they would probably sort of simmer down. Whereas, again, the abstract and absurdity of Aruto is that he's still got this pizzazz about him, which is what everyone loves about him, to be fair. But again, for me, it just stretches the, even if it's fictitious, it still, to me, it just stretches that to its extreme.
Yeah, fine, but I'm gonna throw a comparison, and I'm gonna end this topic, if you will, here, or this section. But if you talk about absurd, then you use Ex-Aid. I'm going to use Ex-Aid as an example.
Oh, Ex-Aid's definitely got absurdity in it. All right.
Not just that, just the main concept of having doctors and gaming, and you smush it together, and somehow that series worked like a charm.
Yeah, to you. To you. We've already had this discussion.
No, I don't care. Because you say this is absurd. Ex-Aid is way more absurd than this.
Right. When it comes... I mean, I would say... Right, I will still say... I don't know about comparison, but I'd say, both Ex-Aid and 01 are both absurd. They both stretch fiction. I mean, in ways... In ways, Ex-Aid's more absurd than 01, granted, which is what you're saying. I'll still say in other ways, 01's also more absurd. But again, I wasn't making a competition out of it. But I was just saying, in its own essence, 01 is still absurd. And that's example one of more that I'll be talking about. But moving on, let's talk about the first arc. The establishment of the story of Metsubojin Rai.
.net.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, they don't even say the dot. It's Metsubojin Rai Neto.
Yeah, well, it's actually in the subtitle. It's Metsubojin Rai .net.
Yeah, because it's meant to resemble a website, but verbally they say Metsubojin Rai Neto. Right, let's move on. Right, so the first arc, we get to see that So where the passing of Aruto's grandfather has come to be,
Yeah.
and the new
Yeah.
president has been appointed, that gives reason for the villains to establish their rise. They are like, right, so he's gone. I don't know why. I mean, they could have taken on the old man quite easily, which they didn't. I don't know whether that adds to the absurdity of this series, but that's example 2 if you want. But still, they have waited for the youngin, Aruto, to take over, and they're like, all right, now's our time to rise. Let's make all the human gears rule the world. And so I will say I absolutely loved the way they established these villains. And so the fact that the first arc is based primarily on the villains for me is a massive plus. Like, because especially in Sentai, they seem to be very vague on the villains. There is none of that here. They go real hard on establishing the villains from one. You get to see how psycho Jin is. You get to see how calculative.
Sociopathic.
And I love them both. What?
So I was going to say sociopathic, Horobi.
Yes. I mean, psychopathic, sociopathic, it's all the same to me. Right, but I will still, and the dark undertone, I knew this was going to keep me watching, no matter how, again, I'm going to say it again, no matter how absurd I felt Aruto was, watching Metsubojin Raineto was what kept, that's what gripped me. That was like, right, I'm invested in these characters. So I was more invested in the villains, and it, for me, beginning to end, it absolutely paid off. But first arc, we do get to see, like all this, the way that they drip the backstory of both Aruto and Metsubojin Raineto. The way that they drip feed us the story and the history of Daybreak, I absolutely loved it. And, like again, I'll talk more about the sort of backdrop later, but, I also felt, especially in comparison to more recent Rider series, you talking about it being fresh, the one thing I found genuinely refreshing is that I was able to follow, I wouldn't even call it linear, but I was able to follow the story quite easily. And again, a year on, I can remember watching those early episodes. I can remember how they established each humor gear and their job role. I remember like how the monsters of the week looked. Now, the one thing about the monsters of the week is they actually took a lot of the Showa monsters of the week and just gave them this metallic, refreshed look, which is a bit of recycling.
Modernized
it. But to me, it was like, again, it's what I said, everything dope is fresh again. So, you had, the big green buggy thing. You had, like, the bat. And the fact is, they kind of, there was the one, I think it was like a crab or something. Again, they kind of take the looks and they made it fresh. They took an unoriginal idea. Bearing in mind, the gimmick Progrise keys, which we will be talking about, is very done before. They kind of do it in a way that's fresh, and and again, I'm taking your term now. But to me, at least it made it memorable, and I'm someone who barely remembers anything, full stop. So you let me know what you think of the first arc.
Well, thank you for actually giving me the chance. So for me, the first arc, or as you'd call it, the Metsubojinrai.net.
It's not dot. There's no dot in it. All right, go on. Carry on.
Anyway, I liked it, and I liked it for a few. Well, I say a few different reasons, but I liked how it wasn't Rider heavy in the face, if that makes sense. Now, while granted, there was Rider, but it felt more character development.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It was definitely heavy on character development, in my opinion. So sure, and again, that's what makes the series pretty good, even if it is abstract.
And another thing I loved is how somehow the villains, the Metsubojinrai.net, were influencing the how to make the, in quotes, monsters of the week. But it's the how that I always loved.
Oh, I mean
Um,
the sort of mind games that especially Jin
yeah,
is playing. Again, that just
it,
adds to his mentality. The way he played out his
yeah,
mentality. Absolutely.
like influencing and sort of like how can I word it? Almost like a propaganda, if you will, in that you have your good and then you have your evil and then you have these human gears in the middle and then these the bad guys are trying to churn so much evil propaganda to them that they basically swing sides, and when they do they just turn into the monsters of the week. And I actually like that different spin that they do, rather than your bog standard, oh, here's your monster of the week today. Oh, here's this one today. Oh, this one just materialized out of nowhere.
I mean, when you look at it retrospectively, I agree with you 100%. So I absolutely do agree with this, and but I'll still say like you look at that psychological element. The series, the one thing I'll definitely be talking about for the final arc is the way that psychology and philosophy plays a massive part in this series. And I guess when you do look at it retrospectively, like you do, I will agree that there is a lot of mind game, there is a lot of psychological. We need to rise. We need
Yeah.
again, like they play on the philosophy quite a lot in this. And again, when you look at it like that, that just adds to it. But when it comes,
I mean,
yeah, go on.
no, I was going to say, like, by all means, the whole psychological mind games that will be played and has been played heavily in the last arc. But again, like you mentioned, we will be double downing on that when we get to that.
Like sort of leading it into the next category. But the other thing about this first arc and sort of coming, three mini arcs leading off this first arc is one. You look at Ames and I can't remember her name, Valkyrie. Uh,
Yaiba.
Yaiva, I knew that is on the tip of my tongue. Like the way she was so mysterious in the beginning because she was kind of there but kind of not there, and then the way she was bossing Fuwa around, it was like it just kind of added to like the psychology, the philosophy. But then, I remember apart from seeing this story of Daybreak and Aruto and Metsubojin Rai being drip fed to us, it was also, oh, what's her story? What's she getting at? What's she doing? Why is she there? Kind of thing. And, that mysterious kind of play that she did, it was kind of really good. And then we kind of were led up into the second arc of Zaya Enterprise and the job competitions. But the one that was also established around this time was also Ikazuchi's story arc as well. So I absolutely loved Ikazuchi's look. Again, because even though they were playing off of that sort of Showa Rider refreshed look, the one thing that I absolutely loved was the Dodo Magia being, and again, something that I kept harping about on social media is the fact that the dodo being an animal of Mauritius, where like my family originate from, it was quite an original spin for not just Kamen Rider but for Japan to do. Because every time I speak to someone Japanese, like sometimes they might have heard of Mauritius, sometimes they haven't. But they actually added the dodo animal as like part of an extinction, and it fits very well with the narrative that Metsubojin Rai want to do of extinguishing the humans, making the humans extinct. So them, really calculatively playing. I'm talking about the writers here, calculatively playing the dodo into this, and then making Ikazuchi such a strong main character as well.
Can I can I add something about the dodo while you're on about it?
Yeah, go on.
What I loved about the dodo, the actual, and in its way, the actual dodo progress key, or the progress, is literally,
It was
it's a
a
progression.
Zetsumetsu key, but yeah, go on.
Not just that, but still, it evolves, it progresses, and we have
He had
never.
three different forms. Yes, absolutely.
But not just that. Besides main villains, besides main villains gaining the next form and the final form, and pretty much going Super Saiyan or whatever, I can't remember the last time I've seen in a Rider series where a villain, and no pun intended, but progresses or evolves. And I love that.
Agree.
You see the progression.
Again, I absolutely love the Kazuchi storyline, and the brother storyline arc. He was very, like you could see the progression there, and you could see, like for me personally, I even felt the heartbreak there. It was quite a strong storyline for them to do.
Mm.
But so, as well as the Kazuchi storyline, again, we right at the end of the first arc, we do get this big reveal as to who Yaiba's working for. It is obviously Amatsugai of Zaya Enterprise, and we will touch on the Job story arc in a moment. But let's talk about like those Progrise keys and those Zetsumetsu keys that we do see very prominently in the first arc. I mean, I did like all the different Progrise keys. And the way that they kind of, I mean, even though, as much as I didn't like that neon yellow that 01 was sporting from the off, at least when he was like adding the red tiger or the blue shark to him, it kind of broke it up. It kind of gave it a bit more colour. And even though they were going with this pastel neon colour palette, I was like, at least it kind of adds to it and, like the powers. But the one thing that I'm massively disappointed on, especially when it comes to just 01 as a whole, is like, these Progrise keys become like eventually meh. Like they use them prominently in the first arc. But again, the one thing that seems to be on form for Kamen Rider, and 01's included in this, is like, alright, you got your your sellable gimmick, your collectible gimmick first arc, but then after the first arc it virtually disappears. But at least at the moment I will pay homage to that. And again, it was a genuine shame for me. And again, sort of adding to the whole abstract thing that I keep describing the series as. So another thing that was referenced in the first few episodes is like we get to see this henshin change between forms, and you get to see that bright yellow mask kind of be changed away from 01's face, and a lot of people were actually wondering if Aruto was actually human gear. And yet, at least when we see this, we get to see like a little bit of the complexity behind like this whole technology-based series. But then, unlike, say, something like O's, which was where a lot of comparisons fell because it was a lot of animal gimmick going on, a lot of animal motif going on, at least we get to see that actually, this was like a very prominent thing, but at the same time, they kind of did away with it after the end of the first arc. And, it's tragic in my opinion. They could have done so much more with it after the first arc, but they barely did. In my opinion.
See, when it comes to the suits design, I'll talk about that in depth. But when it comes to the gimmick, if you will, and the devices, that being the Progrise keys, I'm at two folds with them, to be honest. And what I mean by that is, conceptually, I liked the Progrise keys. I liked how it's different. I like how it's almost like somewhere between Double's Gaia Memory, but more oversized but unique, and more. I don't want to go as far as saying futuristic, but it felt different enough. That it stood on its own, but it had that slight, how can I word it, nostalgic flavor, but like a hint of it. And what's more, I liked how, again, even though it's called Progrise keys, you do see the, not just progression, but evolution. You go from the 01 Progrise key, you then have the,
I mean,
you have the rising
01 specifically, you definitely had that progression, but the others didn't. But
no, wait, 1 minute. 1 minute. No, you have the rising hopper, you have the assault hopper, you then have the
shining hopper, a metal cluster hopper,
shining assault hopper, then you have the metal cluster hopper, and then you had 02, but then that's another matter. With Vulcan, you have Rampage, which is his ultimate, and then you had Assault Vulcan. Assault Wolf,
Right,
sorry,
so yeah, like talking about again sort of specific devices. I mean, again, like you had those evolutions with again specifically the grasshopper and the wolf. But again, you look at everything else, there was none of that. But you know, like I'm not saying that it was a bad thing for again Hopper and Vulcan forms. But for yeah, I mean, my kind of point was that it's fair enough for those two, but for everything else, there was none of that. And like,
right, again,
talking about the devices, I mean, we've got to look at I mean, looking at the series as well. Like, you got to remember that the villains also had a similar system, the Zetsumetsu keys, and they all had like their raid risers. And like the one thing that a lot of fans have pointed out is that this series had a ridiculous number of belts. In fact, probably the most belts in a series.
yes.
And again, like I actually did end up buying the Zetsumetsu, the Raid Riser belt for the Zetsumetsu key for Dodo Magia. It was actually a good belt, to be fair, but at the same time, so many belts, and I feel for the fans who do collect belts. That's all I've got to say on that.
So let me just So just the premise during the first two arcs, you had at least 4 belts, mind you. You had the 01 driver, you had the shot riser, you had the 1000 driver, and you had the
Raid Riser.
Oh,
yeah, you had Raid Riser, you had the Force Riser. But I think those are the later arcs.
No, Force Riser, that's what it was called. Not Raid Riser, Force Riser.
Well, there was a Raid Riser as well, but I think that was in the second arc. But still, again, a ridiculous number of belts, and I feel for those that collected them. I mean, things like...
But then...
Yeah, like, going on to artillery, though. So, like, covered keys, covered belts. The artillery, I mean, we've got, like, a sword for... like a sort of fold-out sword suitcase into a sword for 01. I can't remember the name. I think it was called like Slash Sword or something maybe. I don't know. I think I'm making it up. But then you do have the shot rider for Vulcan and Valkyrie.
No. Can I jump in on that?
Go on.
So when it comes to artillery and weapons, so basically they were all gimmickry with suitcases, that being with business orientation. So what they did was...
because Vulcan had a shotgun as well, didn't he?
Correct. So basically, you know how the terminology in Japan, you have like an attache case. So basically, that's
the attache arrow, of course.
Yeah. Correct. Right. So let me rewind. So with 01, his main one was called an attache caliber, as in Excalibur sword.
Right. I remember this now.
With Vulcan, you had attache shotgun, and then you had
there was an attache arrow. Yeah.
Correct, which turned into a bow. Now, I liked that uniqueness of one shape converting into a plethora of things.
I can give it that. I'll give it that.
I mean, it's like having, say, who is it? Wizard having the cans, the animal cans.
Foodroids, I think they were called.
Effectively, yes. Or Candroids, they were called.
Right.
And I like that kind of how you can take one shape and you can just convert it into whatever. Mm-hmm. So I do like that. Now, when it comes to vehicles, now I'm gonna be
01's bike. I'll be honest, I didn't like it in a nutshell.
Agreed. But now I'm gonna sneak one in. Because I feel it's more. I'm classing it more as a vehicle than a suit.
You're going to talk about those big giant things, aren't you?
Correct. The mammoth form.
Yeah, Breaking Mammoth, yeah.
Well remembered. And me personally, I don't know how to feel about Breaking Mammoth, to be honest. I was like, It always has to have a big CG oversized form, to be honest. I mean,
Well, they did that for Geo. They did it for the one. I don't remember anything like that for Build. And then Xaid had 99, level 99, I think, or level
maximum.
yeah, maximum. But you know, I mean, for me, that's neither here nor there. But when it comes to yeah, I mean, again, the point I made about all the progress keys is like you don't really see them beyond the first arc. And I'll say, yeah, you brought up Breaking Mammoth. That's exactly how I feel about that too. I mean, it was all right. You know, like again, it's a bit of the they're doing that again. You know, I'm pretty sure it looked very similar to the Time Mazines. But I will still say, like, again, it doesn't really matter because I didn't really use it beyond the first arc. I mean, Gaim also had the melon arms.
Oh, that was funny.
But again, you don't really see it beyond the first arc. So to me, it's here nor there on that one. But when it comes to weapons, well, one thing that I will specifically note, and again, you look at Jin, you look at Ames, they use actual guns. They use actual artillery. You know, in its basic, everyday, real life form, that even people feeling that Jin wielding a gun was quite, again, it just added to his psycho. I'm not sure if this was off the back of, like, things like the Joker and stuff, but, just adding to that, it's like it just adds to him, in my opinion. But I can also see why something like that would be controversial, why there'd be a lot of backlash, and why they don't really have something like that in kids shows. But this show went all out on it, and I love it.
Agreed. Can I see? Here's the thing. Now, adding to my comment of the videocracy of how many belts there were, and as you mentioned about Jin gets, not only does he have the Force Riser, but then and I'll mention more on it when it comes to suits, but he then gets the Slash Riser. And then you also have, as you mentioned rightly, the Raid Risers. Then in the third arc, you then get a whole smatter of another bunch of...
Ark's driver was actually pretty cool. And like the fact that, because all the others had like all these elaborate pulleys, his was just like a tap on the top. I like that. I thought that was cool.
You had, wait. But you had the Arc driver, you had Arc Scorpion driver, you had the 02 driver, and I'm counting
the 02 driver was. I mean, we can talk about this now. I mean, the 02 driver was very elaborate, right? So like,
I like
these foldings, and it had all the little animatronics. I mean, to be fair, the Thouser driver also had animatronics in it, which fair, I've not seen the toy form. But on the show, you get to see like these little LCD, LED going on.
LED.
But whatever it is. But again, like I'll say specifically the Arc driver. Again, it was just that little bit more sleeker, even if it did look a bit generic on the front. But when you got the Henshin rollout, it was immense. And like to add to the artillery, like we get to. I love the way that Arc Zero manages to use all the attached weapons, and then even at the end, like I will mention this now, like Kamen Rider Saber had his jacking brake syringe thing. I absolutely love that weapon too, and no.
See, that is better, but one weapon I despise more than that was the Metal Cluster Hopper's weapon. That
was garbage.
Fluorescent...
Because, to be fair, like I mean, the story behind it was good. Like just to interrupt you, the story behind it was definitely good. I loved the story. I cried my eyes out. Very emotional, but the actual weapon as a fighting thing, bearing in mind, I absolutely love, and I'll talk about fighting later. I absolutely love the fight scenes, from episode 1 right up to the end. It was very strong, consistent. But this sword, like, I'm just like, all right, you can see the story, but they could have done something a little bit more original, in my opinion, with that.
I did not like that sword. I did not like how it looks. It was just merely something
I don't think it looked any different. I mean, like it was the same. It was roughly the same shape, just different color. I think
it was worse. It looked worse. It was gimmicky. granted, you can slap it on the back of a Tash Caliber, but then whoop-de-doo-dah, you know? Anyway, I think
So
we've just
talking
turned up.
about Metal Cluster Hopper and even Thouser, let's talk about the second arc, the
Now we're
of Zaya
talking.
Enterprise and the job competition arc. So I'm
Right.
off by saying I think by this point I could really feel the level of how abstract this is. So I'm going straight off with this again. How abstract it is. So point number, I think I'm on 4 now as to what. So you see, like, okay, you got Zaya Enterprise, you got Hidden Intelligence. Why? I mean, all right. If one company wants to take over the other, there's normally a procedure for that, and da 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 da. But they do this really abstract, and yes, I am aware it's a children's show. They do this thing of, oh, how about we have a competition as to who's got the best company? This is the most abstract and absurd idea ever. Like, I doubt anything like this would happen in real life. This is exactly why this is absurd. So I'm just like, all right, work of fiction, kids show, let's roll with it, and just get to. I mean, to be fair, it's still abstract and absurd. But to be fair, the lessons that these competitions teach kids, I'm going to say, is actually really good. So, like, just to pluck one random example, the flower arranging round.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
the lessons behind that. Those 2 to 4 episodes. There was also the episode, the lawyer round, which we had the appearance of Yellow Buster, Blue Buster, and Hewwo Soldier. That was quite cool for the Sentai fans.
Yeah.
And that's neat.
You then, can I?
Go on.
No, I was going to say, not only was it, as you say, abstract, I felt it was unique, and it worked. In that,
unique's definitely a word. Yeah, go on.
I mean, but not just that, but also the fact that when I first heard, okay, let's have a competition, and I was gonna roll my eyes out.
I did. No, I actually did. But go on.
But then when you watch it conceptually,
again,
you just roll
with it. Play, of course. Yeah, of course you roll with it. Yeah, I mean, no one.
You just roll with it, and
really
it just somehow it works. Somehow, I don't know what the writers were smoking, but seriously, it works in that they were showing the not difference.
I'd say it only works because of the lessons it taught, which is what I already said.
No, not just that. Not just that. But the fact that both sides were trying to prove who was better between what humans could do better, what the AIs can do better.
I mean, Zaya Spec was garbage. I mean, that was just Google Glass, wasn't it?
No comment.
Well,
but
yeah, go on.
But nevertheless, I mean, granted, the whole Zaya Spec, whatever, that was just a mere gimmick within the show. But
they didn't even sell those. I mean, they sold the Humor Gear earpieces, which I know a few people that bought those, but they didn't sell the Zaya Spec. So I'm just like, why? But still, like, all that garbage to a side. Seeing Amatsugai's story unfold as well. So again, obviously where they detracted from Metsuborjin Raineto, they went on to Amatsugai like he's actually 44 years old, even though he's being played by 20-something. Yeah, that is abstract. That is so, it's like insane. Like, I can't, to be fair, off the top of my head, I can't remember the backstory they gave to why he was looking so young, but the fact that they did that, that's just absurd. It's both absurd and abstract. And
but let me ask this while you're on about abstract. But did it work for you?
I would only say because I love the Matsugai. The only reason it worked for me is because I love the Matsugai's character. Now, when it comes to Matsugai, I could easily see the comparisons between a Matsugai and Dan Kuroto from X-Aid. But to be honest, I wasn't hot. I wasn't that hot on Dan Kuroto, but I do love a Matsugai. And again, Dan Kuroto's a big fan favourite. So
yes,
you're saying that just because you're a big... But for me, I actually, like, a Matsugai is better than Dan Kuroto. That's just my opinion. Probably will be frustrated for saying that. But
Yes.
I absolutely loved Amatsugai. You know, he was such a
Right.
character. You know, the whole Sen Percenter thing is like, what are you on? And I, you know, like going to the final arc, I love the backstory behind that as well.
Yes.
And yet, you know, the way they drip fed us his story was absolutely great, and the way he developed in the final arc was abstract. Like, didn't see that
Right.
at all. Yeah, like, I'd have probably put bets that he was going to be the final villain at the end. But really, like, especially in this second arc, I will say, before we start talking about the side pieces of the second arc, I'll say that I loved how they established in the second arc that actually it's not just a linear good versus evil, one group,
Mm.
another group.
Mm.
You had Mitsuborg and Rynet still bouncing around in the background, and, you know, the whole
Yeah.
arc thing. You had hidden intelligence and the whole satellite Zay thing. But then Zaya Enterprise was like the third corner to the triangle, and they were all like, you know, is the enemy of your enemy your friend kind of thing. It's like it really plays on that psychology so much. And again, and unlike say Build, you know, and again I will use Build as an example because they had like all the war politics going on as well. But for me, like, I just about was able to follow it while it was airing, and then I quickly forgot how things worked. Whereas even 6 to 9 months, you know, like roughly 6 months on, I can still remember how they played out that triangle and is the enemy of your enemy your friend, and you know,
Which one?
the fact that Jin and Horobi kept having these fights of their, you know, their inner workings, and you know, is Horobi really a Humagear in, like, who's reached that point of singularity? There's a lot going on, and so there's only so much we can cover, even if we are talking for a long time about this. But still, it's just so much going on, but it was still quite easy to follow, which I will still say for the second arc.
I will agree that when it comes to the arc itself, how they, and I don't want to use this terminology, but spoon fed, but in a positive way. And what I mean by that is this, it's not in your face, but it almost like takes your hand and takes you along this next journey, this next arc, this here's the competition, join us.
No, see, like, I mean, I've been using the term drip fed, which is very different to being spoon fed. So I still felt that, again, especially with a lot of psychology and philosophy at play in this whole series, I like the way that it was drip fed. Like, you know, it wasn't spoon fed.
Gingerly.
You still had it presented to you, and it was down to the individual how they perceived the lessons that were trying to be taught and what side
Gingerly.
take and who would feel empathetic for who. And yeah, I absolutely love that. And again, you just see this battle that Horobi has inside his head. You then, you know, and during this arc as well, we get to see Jin reappear in that amazing suit, and I will be wanting one day, hopefully, to get that suit. I know the people that made that suit. Yeah, I know the company that made that suit, and I want to try and get one of those suits, even though I rarely wear suits. So that would be absolutely amazing. And again, so even when it comes to clothing, which we'll talk about later, Jin really had it on point because he went from that shaggy assassin's look. You know, like again, even Ikazuchi had that look going on, but he re-emerged in that really sharp, you know, cut suit. Amazing. So some side pieces to the second story arc. We had a lot more going on with Fuwa's backstory. This is him like saying, "Oh, I hate Humagears," and then he doesn't. You know, like, I mean, because even before the reveals happened and his tie-in with Naki, who was, you know, I will say Naki was an obscure character, but Fuwa's backstory was quite, you know, it was kind of quite intense, and all this stuff about the chip, and then it just kind of dissipated right at the end, just before the hiatus. What did you think of it?
See, right. Again, two ways about it with Fuwa's backstory. One, I liked it until they, and by the way, I do like the whole chip story thing. I love that, especially with Yaiba. I felt it added on to the character.
Oh, I mean, because Yoda also had a side arc story as well, and that was quite a funky ending. Yeah, go on.
But that aside, the one thing I didn't understand, and this is just me, is Naki, how she integrated with Fuwa. But that's just me. I didn't get that because it was just thrown in, and I'm like in my head, who the what?
Right.
And then they barely mentioned it until the third arc, and then it again she just pops up, and then it's like, oh look, you're another effing rider, go
Right.
girl.
The thing is, I'm right. Firstly, I think Naki's meant to be a guy, but there was
I don't know.
no. There's this play about Naki being like a not transgender, but something like very unique about Naki. Put it that way. But when it comes to Naki's sort of involvement in the story, I'll be honest, I was a bit confused about it too. But ironically, and I'll be talking about the specials in a moment. But one of the specials just to answer you quickly, there was a special called Project Thousa, and Project Thousa Part 2 is going to be out in November. But Project Thousa Part 1 establishes Naki's story a lot better, and it gives better understanding and Naki's role in Zaya Enterprise. And there's quite a few unique scenes, like seeing Naki and Guy together a lot, like talking and stuff. So there was that. But again, at least right at the end of the second arc, we get to see all the villains of Mechibojin Raineto congregate, and that was kind of a very cool ending to pre-hiatus. And
Right.
yeah.
One thing I will say I did not expect was before as you mentioned, the hiatus, right at the end of that arc, the subtitle, if you will, or the screen goes into end of part 1. That interested.
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? Yeah, sure.
That interested me, and I'm like, how is this part 1 in my head? Because we already had 2 developing stories, or 2 arcs, if you will. And I'm like, it really interested me, not in a bad way, just really interested me how this is the end of part 1. And it made me want more.
I mean, it kind of didn't quite work out like that anyway, simply because of the hiatus and the way that they had to format everything afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and it was actually, again, it was like the way they kind of ended the second arc. It kind of put a lot of questions, but then we get this whole thing with hidden manufacturing as well, which they develop a lot more right in the third arc. But just to break away from talking about the main series for a second, I'll look at how the characters looked. So I'm talking about the way they presented themselves clothing-wise. So one thing I've kept saying how abstract and absurd the series is, but specifically how abstract and absurd Aruto is. Those bright yellow trainers, that hoodie, and I think those were meant to be smart trousers. I couldn't quite tell. I really did not like the way that he was casually dressed and the fact that he kept trying to bring that look in. I don't feel he pulled it off.
Right.
He was in it from the beginning. Go on.
I'm gonna jump inside. I'm gonna say now. I like how he looked, but, and I'm adding a but in it. The problem with the but is, and the reason I didn't like it is because he pretty much wore the same damn thing.
Oh no, they do that. No, but that's it. They do that in most Toku anyway.
I don't care. Like every human being, you have to change your damn clothes.
No,
so,
they do that in all Toku, but
my point is, this is not his uniform. This is just his day-to-day. If it was a uniform, I can understand. If it was, someone that's in law enforcement. If it was someone going
put it this way, all right, but to progress the Kagura a bit more, look at Amatsu Guy. he was always dressed in white. He was always dressed in that white suit. But the thing is, I actually like that suit. You look at Hewwo.
That's the uniform.
Also in a, that was like a suit, and yeah, like I think you do get to see her in casual clothing a couple of times. But then Izu was also the same. But then she's a human gear, so it doesn't really matter. I actually did like the look of Izu and Chester's uniform. And, and again, like, they had, like, the coloured hair as well. I like that too. I'll even say, like, even the Ames uniform, like, it was, like, very military-esque. I absolutely loved that too. So,
But that's uniform. That's uniform.
Of course, but again, I absolutely love that look. But yet, still, I did not like Aruto's look. And still, like, and finally, like, just, you can chip in at the end, but I'll say Metsubojin Rai had the best look. I loved Jin's Metsubojin Rai look. I loved his Burning Falcon two-tone suit look. I liked, this is me just gushing now, but I absolutely loved Horobi's look. I loved how he had his little, it wasn't a bandana, it was like a headband. And then, like, at the end, his, like a couple of times actually, his headband gets removed and he had amazing hair. Ikazuchi, he was just too cool for school. Like, he was an astronaut for, like, his origin story and stuff. And then he was kind of like this astronaut, Neil Armstrong rebel kind of look afterwards. I absolutely loved that. That was too cool for school.
For me, I will agree with you that I like where the uniforms worked. So, like, Izu, Siesta, yes. I liked, I'll be honest, I thought the Ames military squad was very generic, if you will, but it was alright. Where, say, like the doctors, the police officers, whatever, they were, they're good, they were very uniform-esque.
No, they were uniform, weren't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing. It was very uniform. They were very...
Yeah,
I can't word it.
Anyway, no, I get what you're saying. So
I don't want to say bland, but it was just...
It was accented, of course.
But like you mentioned, when it comes to MetsuboJinrai.net, that I love how they all had their personality with their clothing, or through their clothing, to be exact. Jin had a suit when Ikazuchi came in with to join them. He had his very rebellious leather jacket style. Horobi was just Horobi, really. But then when Horobi had that wardrobe change at the end, I liked that more.
Okay, yeah, I'll get that. Alright, so we'll talk about the movie and we'll talk about the hiatus specials. So
right, I'm gonna jump.
Right, go on.
Right, movie from me. I haven't seen it, so it's all to you. What did you think?
Right, fine. So Reiwa. So I think it was I can't remember the full title. I think it was like Reiwa: The First Generation or something. So we get a much clearer look at the backstory for Aruto, which actually made more sense. But then, where they actually do, because this is the crossover with Geo, we do get to see, like, Tokiwa Sogo and crew get their memory back via the help of Woz, believe it or not. But then, it kind of becomes really abstract that, there's this, without spoiling it, it's basically a humor gear that, that was actually this, the older equivalent of Izu, then rebelling against the grandfather and basically causing havoc. So we get to see a lot of that going on. We get to see the Ride Watches again. We get to see another 01. We get to see another Ichigo, which was very bizarre. And, it kind of sets about this whole thing about, Reiwa being, 01 is Reiwa #1. He is the first rider, which was something that they really touched on quite heavily at the end of Overcourt's movie, if you've seen that. So I kind of liked that. But again, there was a lot of abstract. Yeah, I mean, I keep saying abstract. It was like a lot of. I will say, even though it was like a fun movie to watch, there was a lot of plot holes in this. So, like, a lot of people did criticize Geo for, like, not being in depth enough with its arcs and stuff. But to be fair to Geo, they had a lot to cover, whereas this movie didn't really cover anything. Had quite a few plot holes, but because it was a mixture of Geo and Zero One, the action was very mixed. So it wasn't the worst Kamen Rider movie, but it wasn't the best either. And again, like, I was spotting plot holes. I'm like, well, why couldn't they have done things like this? And I won't spoil the end, but I won't spoil the end, but anyone who does know the end will know that this whole movie was pointless. That's all I've got to say on the movie.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, have you seen the, while we're talking about the films, okay, number one, do people need to see this movie to get for the
For
Zero
Zero
One
One,
story?
I feel
does it carry?
it will add. So watching Reiwa the First Generation will add to, like, it will give you a little bit more of a better understanding to Zero One the series.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think it will answer a couple of plot holes that the series might have. So like, I had a couple of questions that I was thinking, like, what's this about? But then I'll say that the series does answer, but then it also adds more. Again, it's a very philosophical thing. It adds more questions, and then there's a lot of plot holes. But then again, they just make it this pointless movie, which is very neither here nor there. It's a very cliche thing for them to do.
But then, in regards to movies, then what about the Hyper Battle DVD?
I know I know I've watched it. I just can't remember it. I know I've watched it because
Well, that kind of says it.
Which one?
Well, that kind of says
No,
how good
right.
that is.
So anyway, so let's talk about those hiatus specials. So the first one we got was the two-part presidential special. Have you actually seen all these hiatus specials? No.
I'm not aware of it.
All right, if you haven't seen them, I'll brush over them really quickly. So the first set of specials was the presidential specials part 1 and 2. These were like quite fun snippets that we get to see, like, oh, this is what happened there. That's really cool. Oh, he's, like, it's very clip show. But the good thing about them doing it in these sorts of specials is that, they've glossed over it, they're done, they don't have to do any more clip shows. Even though the third arc had plenty of flashbacks. Anyway, but then the really weird set of specials, and I know it started with the shooting special, and then there was like a job. They called it the job specials 1 and 2. So it was like, even though they had different names, it was shooting special, then jobs 1, jobs 2. These
what?
Yeah, so like these specials are basically.
Are we talking about the animated one?
No, I'll talk about that in a minute. So the shooting specials in part 1 and jobs 1 and 2, this is like Fuwa trying to re-establish himself, having learnt his real backstory, and then saying, alright, maybe I should do a different job. And then ironically they go through all the jobs of the different humor gears with narration from Yua and Izu, before he then just decides, well, actually, I'm better off working at Ames, which, again, it's, considering it was a hiatus and they were recording it mostly in a studio, it was a fun little filler, a bit pointless, and, I can see why most people didn't want to subtitle it anyway. But then the animated Everyday Life 01 anime, those are quite fun. We've only got 5 minutes, so there's going to be a third part released soon. I will say that, again, it was very reminiscent of Deno Imagine anime. So quite a quirky, fun little thing. And then so I mentioned as well, there was, I think it was an online exclusive, Project Thousa. So with Project Thousa, we get more in-depth origin story to Amatsu Guy. We get a better explanation of Naki. And ironically, part 2 is only going to be out in November. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. It'll be interesting because I believe that Project Bowser Part 2 will delve more into Fuwa and Yaiba's story. Now, were there any other... just off the top of my head, I need to think if there was any other specials. I mean, there was quite a few others. If I remember them, I'll mention them later on.
So
all right, so...
You've got... Hang on.
Go on.
So I'm skimming through Wiki just to sum it up quickly. So you had your Kamen Rider Warrior First Generation. You've got your Hyper Battle DVD.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your Project Bowser. You've got your President Special, Shooting Special, Super Job War, and then something called a Miraculous Transformation.
That's
the fateful gag battle, which honestly that sounds whatever. Anyway,
so just before we go, I mean, right, let's see. So a couple of things before we go into the final arc. What did you think of the music for Kamen Rider 01?
It's alright. It's not the best. It's alright.
I love that. I had it as my ringtone for a year. The insert songs, it was subtle and poignant. So especially like where you got, like when they're in the Metsubojin Rainet or Den, it was quite poignant. And and again that Find a New Life just kept being played over and over and over. Honestly, over and over. What did you think of the fighting choreography in 01?
I liked it. Now, this is where I'm going to tie it in with the suits. Kind of. But the reason why I liked the fights and choreography, one, there wasn't that overly stupid I jump so high in the sky, except for when he gets the Falcon progress key. But there's not that over the I have to be careful how to word this. There's no outlandish except when he uses the metal cluster.
Okay.
And the excuse me, the Assault Shining Hopper, where he pretty much just zips and zaps at the speed of light kind of thing. But then it makes sense because he's evolved, if you will. And then what's more, one thing that I do love that adds to all of that fight at the end is when whoever does a finisher, you get the narrator emphasizing what. So first off, they activate their finisher, and then you have the narrator emphasizing at the end that finishing move.
Presented by Zaya Enterprise.
Which there is that as well, and I love
that you reminded me of that because I'd have forgotten otherwise. But like for me, I mean, I'm gonna jump in. I would just jump in because So first, I will say that. For me, bearing in mind, and again, I'm going to brag about this. I've seen every Kamen Rider episode, every Kamen Rider series, 45 episodes. I am definitely going to say that Kamen Rider 01 consistently has probably the best fighting choreography ever.
Oh,
I'm going to say even episode 1. I'm going to say it's a mixture of good fighting. It's a good mixture of good martial art. You've got a lot. I mean, even the CGI, it's not too much, but it's there. You see him running up like mecha and whatnot. So you got and again the zapping around. I'm gonna say that even if I take out the CGI stuff and just look at the martial art combat side, even less of the weapons, just the hand-to-hand stuff, I'm gonna say that there was some ridiculously good choreography in this. And I absolutely loved it, and I do believe it's one of the best. I mean, if you want to tell me what you think is on par or better, then feel free to. But for me, I have
one.
Go on. What's your one?
Right. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna break it into two. Choreography, I might agree with you that 01 is pretty high. Fights, I did have X8 up there.
No, definitely
Because that was
no.
no, that was stupid, but in a good way. However, what adds that little cherry on the top for me was that narrator.
Right, that's
When it
what
comes,
you reminded me of. That's what I was. This is why I interrupted you. When it came,
no.
when it came to the Hisatsu attacks,
Yes.
you had like the Japanese, the Kana, like flash up. Like
Yeah.
this, I mean, I don't know how often they use it in like Japanese anime and stuff, but the only place I have seen that before is Street Fighter. So the fact that
Really?
this, yeah, could mean like I know one example was Akuma or Goki's like Kanji flashes up, and I know they use it in Street Fighter 4 and 5 a lot. Which my memory of both of those is very vague, but I know they did that. And then like you see, like at the end, you see like the sort of Kana vertically and horizontally as well. Those flashcards looked absolutely amazing. So you had the rider kick, the Hisatsu attack, being done through literally a flashcard, and again you had Amatsu Guy's Hisatsu attacks as well. Absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it.
But what's more, and this is only for the 01 driver, it's shown on the review site called MGO316, which, by the way, I love. You should go see him. And he reviews the 01 driver and all the others, by the way. But he mentions, and we barely see this, but once we've seen this once, in that where Aruto uses his progress key whilst he's in, I've got to get this right, Shining Hopper.
Okay.
And he takes the key out and he scans it on the side, and it progresses to bit rise, byte rise, kilo rise, giga rise,
I think I remember.
terra rise. What?
I think I remember. We'll go on.
Anyway, it goes up to whatever, terrorize, whatever. And I don't remember a driver, if you will, that has that kind of progressional system like that. I like it. Like, it's either they have a finisher or not like that kind of level.
Okay, I get you. So
it's not.
So let's move on to the final arc. So throughout the hiatus specials, we had 2 hints leading up to the final arc. We had some general answers to why does Izu look different in the opening credits, and we got a lot of hints on arc 0. So we get answers to Izu looking different, being in the form of.
Can I just correct you? Zero arc or arc 0?
Oh, don't, because I kept going back and forth while I was watching it. But yeah.
0 arc.
Right.
Isn't it?
I don't look. Even you don't know now. I don't know. We'll just call it arc form. Arc form. You're gonna look it up. Right. So.
Oh hell yeah.
So like during the job specials, we do get to see Azu like taking information from. I think that was the miraculous special that you were talking about, actually. So the miraculous, if I remember correctly, the miraculous special was where Azu goes around extracting information from the 4 Metsubo Jinrai Netto members to then make the arc key. I can't remember the full name. Arc. It wouldn't be Progrise. The arc key that eventually goes into the arc driver. And I absolutely love that this final arc was a real roller coaster. And once I'd gotten over a lot of what was abstract and absurd about the series as a whole, I genuinely enjoyed the final arc. It was a heated roller coaster, and even though there had to be, yeah, the one thing I didn't like was that there was cliffhangers at the end of every episode, which is pretty much a Kamen Rider given. At least, again, unlike say Build, I actually found them bearing in mind these were only a few weeks ago now. I at least found them memorable and easier to follow, and that does include all the new suits that they introduced, and they did introduce a lot of new suits in this final arc, which
Right.
I know in early Heisei they really frowned upon, like, new suits being introduced in the final episode or like one of the last couple of episodes. But ironically, we were even in the last 2 episodes, we were introduced to like 3 new forms that include. I mean, I don't know whether Vulcan's two-tone form was considered his final form or not. But bearing in mind he also had the one where Vulcan was multicolored with all the animals put together. But still, we got to see like realizing Hopper, as well as I think it was called Omatsu Vulcan or something. I absolutely loved those. I loved all the looks, and again the fighting choreography going through to the end, absolutely amazing. And like when it comes to Arc, becoming possessing members of Metsubojin Ryoneto, it was quite funny to see how they played it out. But then that final battle was, again, there were so many philosophical questions. And the one thing, and again, we're slowly wrapping this up anyway, but I'll say that even as abstract and absurd that I keep citing this series as being, I will still say that there are a lot of lessons that apply to real life that I saw. And
Right.
it posed a lot of philosophical questions about acceptance, about leaping towards a dream. It leads into acceptance, aspiration, and again, like the one word that they kept using a lot in the final arc was malice. And it just posed a lot of questions and taught lessons really hard.
If I might.
Go for it.
Well, first off, I'll correct myself that you were right in that it is Arc 0, and then you had Arc 1 as well.
Yeah, all right, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Right. So that aside, how I felt about the last arc was, at first, I was indifferent in that it felt like a very washed down version of what how can I say, the story of Revenge of the Sith from Star Wars is like, how someone turns to the dark side and then it gets consumed by the powers of the Sith kind of thing, but very washed down, if that makes sense.
I see what you're saying, but I disagree with you. But go on.
But I was going to add that there was that ending, and I'm not going to give it away, but I do like, and I'm glad
how it was a good ending. No, I mean, I will say, like, there have been some garbage endings in Kamen Rider, but this was pretty good.
Yes, and I was really surprised how the ending unfolded, and that made up for how this cat and mouse kind of game worked, in that, oh, you get this, oh, you get this possession, oh, now let's move on to the next one, oh, you died, oh, okay, let's just revive you, okay, kind of thing. It was very higgledy-piggledy at times, but then the way that they wrapped it worked really, really well, and I was really surprised.
Okay, I mean, just to kind of wrap up the final arc, the one thing I will say, one of the mini stories in that final arc was Guy's backstory, and the way that he softened up right at the end, which I thought, which was probably one of the few things. Bearing in mind, I absolutely love Thou's. I love Thou's look. I loved Guy's personality. But the way they kind of rounded off his origin story, and the way that they kind of made it, like they used the Sony Aibo dogs in this and passed them off as hidden products. I'm
Mm.
like, what are you doing? And I thought that was, I mean, again, that was 01 being abstract again. But I'm just like, why
I mean,
are you doing this to him? It's like they could have at least toned down the absurdity in the way
yeah,
they rounded him off. But now he's just, like, because they also introduced a new CEO of Zaya Enterprise.
yeah.
His character I actually did like. Even though he was only in it for a few episodes, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, because I thought they were going to make him out to be like a supervillain or something, but even though they just gave him this massive backdrop, they had him drop back, I was like, you know what? He seems alright, but they could have done so much more with that.
Right. Number one, the new president of Zaya Enterprises, I couldn't give two toshes about.
No,
Number
no,
two, the way.
I thought he played a good role. Even for
No, that's the problem. We barely know him. We barely see him, and that's the thing. He's just there to go, "Hey, I'm just taking over your
no,
job,"
because
kind of thing.
he made some key decisions and made some again playing on the philosophy, waxing philosophy on it. He was actually pretty decent, even if it was only for a few
No.
episodes.
But what I would agree with you on is, sorry, from my angle, I loved how Amatsugai, used, or how the name Thouser came into play. I love how
That was clever.
that. Yes, and I love that story. How he gained I'm
His
trying
father
to
was a
word.
nutcase, though, wasn't it?
I'm not gonna say I don't want to spoil it, but I love the backstory. I'm just trying to think what else I can touch on with the whole finale, but I mean, I will
Again,
agree. I do like.
that's absolutely cool. But just to, I mean, all right. So to round off the series before we talk about the characters, what episode stood out for you in the 45 episodes?
Actually, the as you mentioned, a mixture of what stood out and also the climax and fight. That last fight was bombastic and stupid, and it was awesome,
For
and I
me, I mean,
loved it.
all right. I'm gonna drop this just before we start talking about
Oh,
politics.
can I add one more? Can I add one more
Go on,
episode
go
that
on,
I
go on,
love?
go on.
The first appearance of Metal Cluster Hopper. I love that episode and the build up to that.
Oh, okay. All right. I will say, like, for me, episodes standing out would probably be the flower arranging episode because again, I felt that taught some good lessons. I'll also say, like, when they revealed, when they started talking about Daybreak Town, and again,
Mhm.
quite early on, and like how the town was actually supposed to be where humans and human gears were supposed to be getting on.
Mhm.
Like, there was a couple of episodes where they were like, oh, like they made, I think it was right at the end of the second arc, where they did the whole politics round and you had the MC humor gear, the rapping humor gear.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Oh, like the whole re-establishment of a second Daybreak. Those episodes
Mm.
really stood out for me. But talking about, what is it like when it came to that kind of final standoff? I'll still say, like, I absolutely loved the way that they waxed philosophy throughout this series. So looking at some real specific points, what I will say, the settings and locations for Kamen Rider 01. I love the Metsuborjin Rai sort of hole in the wall setting and what Daybreak kind of looked like. The hidden offices were quite generic, but I absolutely loved the way each setting, especially when you had like the satellite setting when they were all up in outer space and that did all look pretty good.
Okay, I'm at a reversal, and what I mean by that is I couldn't give. See, I wish we had more of Daybreak Town and not just a hole in the
No,
wall.
because like when they kept they kept walking through into like when they would walk into Daybreak Town, I think they used it in Drive and A couple of you know, like it's a familiar setting, but every time they crossed into Daybreak Town, like
They just walked over a dam.
yeah,
That
but
is it.
I still thought that was a cool setting.
No, I'm sorry. I wish we saw more of the destroyed town, but that's just me.
Okay.
I I'm at I would personally say from my angle that we barely see that kind of a office environment in Rider. So I personally liked it when you see Zaya Enterprises, main
His office was a
office,
bit
where you
basic
see
though.
no, but it's different. That's why I liked it. Like where you with the hidden intelligence, you have the secret lab, but then the problem is you already have everything with a secret lab.
Yeah, I mean, Double
But
had that
but
really. It reminded me of
yeah,
Double.
but it's the office that I liked. That's what I like.
Oh well. So what? So let's talk very specifically about the armored suits.
Now you're
So we've
talking.
already talked about. So we've already talked about 01, Vulcan, Valkyrie. I'm going to touch on. Right, I know I touched on the Ikazuchi earlier. I'll say Kamen Rider Thousands suit. I absolutely love the look of the purple and gold. I am going to get the figure arts when it releases in September,
Right.
October. I will say that Naki's suit I did not like because it was Japanese wolf. I don't know if there's a specific name for it because bearing in mind we already had Vulcan as a wolf, so I was a bit
Well, it was just called Kamen Rider Knock.
no, but I mean I don't know if there's a specific word in Japanese for Japanese wolf or if they were referring to a specific wolf that's specific to exclusive to Japan. But then
It was just
when you
Japanese.
had Vulcan and Naki's Progress Key combined, where again Vulcan becomes two tone like blue and grey in the I think it was the final episode. I
Mm,
love that look, even if it was
yeah,
an episode.
yeah. Right. Let me ask this to you before I take the reins, if you will, and just completely gush at this. What would you say your worst suit and favorite suit?
Worst suit definitely Naki's because it was garbage. Best, that's a tight one because I absolutely love Thousands, but then is it Arc One? What was the name again? Like like Arcs Black and White. So it was basically black and
What?
white.
Aruto one.
No, not well. Actually, it was Aruto with the arc driver, wasn't it? So
Correct.
that suit was good. But then like when it came to like 02, even though it was just like oh they've just added more splashes of red. I like the fact that he had like the red going down one shoulder like it was a scarf, like a Showa era
Yeah.
scarf. That
Yeah.
was clever. I thought that was a good homage to even though there are plenty of Showa homages here, that was a good homage in my opinion. But like things like Shining Hopper and Assault Wolf and Metal Crust, I mean, Metal Crust Hopper was poignant, but I didn't. Meh. I'd probably say that was also pretty garbage. But best, I'd probably
Really? Wow.
Aruto. I'd probably say Aruto's Zero form was pretty good. Like Zero Arc form was pretty good.
Which is your favorite
I'd probably
suit?
say, like, to take it a step down, the original arc form, like when he kept hopping between the four Metsubojin Raineto members, that form would probably, because it's quite a complicated helmet, kind of a very machine chaser
The
look.
black one.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, again, like
Arc Zero.
it looked very similar to Machine Chaser, but was clearly different.
Yeah. For me, right. I will get this out of the way.
Mm.
The one thing I never like about Mars Rider character, as in when they name their Mars Rider, is when they name their Mars Rider after the character's name. So Mars Rider Horobi, Mars Rider Jin, Mars Rider Naki. No. Come up with. I'm sorry, that is a pet peeve of mine, and I do
Bear
not
in
like
mind,
it.
Geo had Kamen Rider Tsuyokumi.
No, please don't. Don't. Anyway, Poppy, I don't mind because that's on
No,
the
do not talk about Poppy
anyway.
Pipple at all. Don't.
That was hilarious. But anyway, that's another matter. My point is with this, you had 3 with its effing name. No. Now, that's out of the way.
That's such a bizarre pet peeve.
I don't like it. Anyway, that aside, I do like this series suits. What I didn't like, and I'll rephrase that. What I couldn't care less was the small armaments, not the upgrades, just the armaments for 01. How he had the polar bear, the falcon, the shark, and whatnot, and whatever. I couldn't give 2 toshes about them. They were just cack.
Well,
However,
they didn't really do anything with them beyond the first arc, which I thought was a shame. I mean, in terms of look, I can see why people didn't like them. Whereas, again, I felt it added to it, and I already said that.
Right. Let's get to the main thing, starting with 01. 01 suit, I like it. Shining Hopper, I thought, okay, it's different, I like it. Assault Shining Hopper, that was interesting.
I think that's the one I did like, because I kind of get a bit muddled personally. Like, I liked Shine. Yeah, I liked the one that had more sharp bits on it.
Anyway. Then they went left field and they went Metal Cluster Hopper, and for me, I personally love Metal Cluster Hopper. I love that. Then they go full left field again, or they just went U-turn and then they went 02, and that I love. I don't know why.
Again, I only really like the scarf bit, but I can see a lot of fans didn't like the 02.
No.
Why they didn't.
There's another reason why I like it, and I have more appreciation for this than with any other. And I spoke to a friend about this, and just to gush about it, but with any other rider that, say, as an example, you take, say, Double's extreme form, you take Cougar's black form, for instance, you take, I don't know, Deno's climax form, whatever. They have this more bombastic, they have a more bigger feel to it. You feel it. With this, or with Kiva, you have the Emperor form. With this, it's just how can I word it? It's not even an evolution. It's just a progress. It's just the next level.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's simplified.
Kind of the story behind it. Yeah, that was exactly what the story behind it was. I mean,
we
barely talked about hidden manufacturing, to be fair, but it was more of a backdrop. But still, like, I could see that that there was that evolution there for a reason. So we all get it.
But the thing is I love the simplicity of 02 suit. I love it. Now, when we get to the villain side of the suits, even though I hate the names, starting from the worst, Naki is crap. Dodo, the final form of Dodo.
How's that second worst? No, that's probably one of the better ones. Yeah, like, obviously, I like Thouroughly. Right. Horobi, Jins I didn't like, to be fair.
Right, no.
Horobi's I did.
But wait, Burning Falcon looked amazing.
I wouldn't call it amazing.
Then you had Horobi, and then you had Arc Scorpion. I love Arc Scorpion.
Arc Scorpion, yeah, I vaguely remember Arc Scorpion, even though it was only a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, where you had like one shot of it. Then you had Thouser, which honestly I was like, about.
No, I love Thouser's look.
No. I couldn't, no. Anyway, then you had Arc Zero. Sorry, no. Then you had Arc 1. Again, I'm sorry, no.
No, so I liked Arc 0 and Arc 1 did look good. Because he had like
I don't like.
didn't he?
Correct. See, Chaser had a better form.
Yeah, but that was
No, not.
along the lines of a modified look of his well, not Roy Muto look. So it
Yeah,
was here or
but
there really. But okay,
see,
but let's kind of I'll move it on. So like we love those are what we that's what we thought of the suits. People can let us know what they thought of the suits in the comments below, etc. But let's finally talk about in focus the cast. So
ooh,
because we've pretty much talked about the whole cast, so this is why it's easy to do this at the end. So I did love Aruto's comedic character and his very heartfelt, sentimental look. Even though I did feel it didn't fit in this, like the environment that he was in. But I felt it taught a lesson. I mean, Fuwa, I absolutely loved like how he was so passionate at the beginning, and then he was all like, and then he became philosophical as the second and third arc progressed. With Yua, we got to see like this kind of really stuck up female, this strong female, who then had to question herself. I thought that was quite cool. I mean, when it comes to Izu, I loved the lessons that she taught, and I loved how she was kind of like this really sassy, hot version of Alpha 5, where she was like this robot assistant, but then, when she had to round up the Humagears to help with the metal cluster sword thing, that was a very heart-wrenching episode for me. Someone that I said I was going to talk about at the end, and I am now, the Vice President. So I can't remember his name, and he had like his managing director next to him, and they were the comedy duo for most of it. The thing is, like, at the beginning, they had him like as a potential villain, and I think they could have done. I mean, it would have been cliche. They could have done something with that. So the fact that they then made him and the managing director this really ridiculous comedy duo, I'm like, you know what? I will give props to that. Because they could have easily have done the cliche, oh, the vice president really does want to be president. But really, they gave him his own philosophical journey as well, which I absolutely loved. I mean, Amatsu guy, we get to see his, he was mostly the same, and then at the end he changed. That's just my opinion. But I do love the fact that he was quite a sort of, he had his own agenda going on throughout. Now, two more characters before I throw it over to you. Two more characters. The Grandad. Again, we primarily see him more in the movie, Reiwa Generation. Again, there was just so much that he didn't answer for in the series. There was a lot, no, I wouldn't necessarily call them plot holes, but there were just a lot of gaps in the story relating to the Grandad. But then finally, that robot dad, who was quite pivotal in the movie. Again, we didn't touch on it in the forms, but the Ichigata suit does look cool in its cyan blue form. That's if I know my colours correctly. But, like again, it was neither here nor there. And then, obviously, you had the movie form of 01 where he does use a Force Riser. I love the abs that it looked... Yeah, I love the abs on the suit, but that was pretty much it. But, again, the robot dad... again, a lot was answered for in that movie when it came to the robot father. So your thoughts on the hero cast?
So, where to begin? I will premise straight off the bat. I love the chemistry between Aruto and Izu. I think
Agreed.
that drives the whole series. I love that. History is, and I'm going to repeat, is what carries and drives the whole series.
Okay,
and you
bit of a
see
strong
that
statement, but okay.
I mean, you see that development of friendship, trust, loyalty, and the fact of what happens at the end. You also feel that gut wrench. You know what I mean? You feel that gut wrench as well. So I love that. Not the gut wrenching part, but anyway. Guy, I do love his story. I'm not going to deny that. I do like his story. The vice president and his, if you
Assistant,
will,
I think it was assistant
whatever,
director or something.
his whatever. I couldn't give two toshes about, to be honest. I'm like, yeah, sure, cool. If anything, I felt Siesta was
Chester,
was
yeah.
better. I preferred Siesta than those two, to be honest. But that's just me.
No, I mean Chester.
Who's
I mean,
left?
because I saw a few fans like fanboying over her, but that was very short lived. But she was an alright character at best.
Then you have, as you mentioned, the grandfather, and then like we like I haven't seen the movie, so I wouldn't know. But we see the grandfather pop up a couple of times here and there. Like, granted, he appeared in the first episode, so I was interested, and then we barely see him, so it's almost like, okay, you
No, because
forget
he
about
died.
it. So,
Yeah, because he died. Yeah, sure.
yeah. But that's my point. It's part of the story, and then it's like, okay, they're saying about the whatever. Then you get the father, which was like, so forgive me, for me, it was like neither here or there. But anyway, villain wise, now this
Alright,
is
you do the
where.
villains first. Go on.
You sure?
Yeah, go for it. You might as well. You've started.
All right. Naki, I don't care. I'm sorry. Forgetful. Ikazuchi for me, again, forgetful, but that's just me. Let me. Jin, I love. I love Jin.
Alright, I'll give you that.
Horobi, I am indifferent. I am indifferent on Horobi, seriously. Like, he was very monotonous, very one. I know he had a vision, I know he had a goal, I get it, but it just felt very one-centric, if that makes sense.
One-centric, I don't think that's a word.
Just, he had a very tunnel vision.
Okay, you mean linear, but yeah, go on.
Yes, very. And I just felt...
See, wait, who are you talking about again?
Horobi.
No, see, I'm gonna like go on it, right? See, you finished done about the villains.
Well, we haven't talked about Eden, but then we'll finish after that.
Right, fine, right. I will interject. So, like Jin, again, this is pretty much stuff we've already talked about. But Jin, like, I do like that psychotic nature to him. But then I also liked, like his demise and the way he was eventually softened right at the end. I thought that was a very good turn for him. When it comes to Horobi, I disagree with you 100% on him being Leonard because he had even as a Humagear, he had this thing about, he had these two sides to him going on, whether he was following the will of the Ark or whether he was following his Humagear programming. So seeing just those two lines does not make him linear at all. Like, I absolutely love the way that Aruto would still have faith in him. That was absolutely amazing. And, he was still fighting with it. And then you got the will of the Ark. And then, we didn't even talk too much about, Aruto's sort of... again, you made the Star Wars analogy earlier. And, like, at least, you got to see, like, when he was Metal Cluster Hopper, he was having a fight with himself. When he, like, saw something happen in the final arc. He then, he was then getting a lot of dark thoughts, and again, the word malice keeps appearing. So I'm like, okay, at least with the Horobi, you could really see the battle right up to the end, and seeing him go, what's the word, vigilante, right at the end, I thought was quite cool. When it comes to Arc, I absolutely love this villain. I mean, it's a villain that wasn't a person, but was kind of a person, but had a personality. I absolutely loved it. And
no, I don't.
Of Eden. So the drop of Eden, the Kamen Rider. This is going to be something that I think either like where it used to be the summer movie, they're going to make it a winter movie, and then potentially a crossover with Saber. It's going to be It's going to be hella to find out what he's about, but it just shows that Arc never dies.
See, for me, I think there has been better villains, as in final
No, all
villain.
right. I
And what I mean,
mean, no, but I'll say it on his own merit. I loved Ark.
no. See, this is where I am going to disagree. And what I mean by that is I liked the story, the last arc between Aruto and Horobi. I will agree, I like that. But I did not like the whole sole possession of, okay, I'm going to be arc for this week. I'm going to be arc for this week.
I
I'm going to be.
actually liked that because it changed it up.
No.
It kept us on our toes. I got to
See,
100% of that. I actually
no, see,
because a lot of people were like, "Oh, who is Arc One? You know, is it Arc One?" Yeah, people were like, "Oh, who's
yeah,
Arc One?
no,
Is it Arc Zero?" No, both of them, because you had Arc Zero and the Arc One, and they were like, "Oh, who's Arc Zero going to be?" People were debating that during the hiatus. They're just like, "Oh, well, actually, the answer's all of them. It's great." So I thought that kept us on our toes, and then I think the reveal of Arc One, I generally shat myself.
See, when we saw Aruto's Arc 1, on one hand, I didn't like the suit, but the how he got it, I like.
Well, again,
really like.
I mean, all right, I'm gonna wrap up. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it all up. So basically, the one thing that I won't necessarily call it a plot hole or a gap, but it comes down to Azu. So Azu's like got this real prominent role in the final arc, and there was a lot of questions that because it's like she says she's acting on the will of the arc, but something tells me that there's a little bit more to Azu than we've got has been let on. And
See,
when she's presenting Eden the Kamen Rider, when she's presented with Eden the Kamen Rider, there's definitely something going on with Azu. So the fact that Azu's the one in Aruto's ear, the fact that Azu's the one in Horobi's ear, it really adds to it.
See, for me, I did not like the moment we see Az. How can I word it? I didn't like it. Like, personally, I just wish they just left the whole actress dead. Like, I know that sounds very morbid, but
that sounds a bit harsh. Yeah.
No, but I mean, if Iz is dead, Iz is dead. Let it. I mean, spoiler that, by the way.
Brilliant.
But we don't need Az.
No,
we don't need.
I disagree with you. Like, I like the way Az's role was played, and again, she was hinted at from the opening credits from episode 1, and then everyone was like,
"Okay,
there's Izu got long hair." It was an amazing development. It was an amazing reveal. That's all I got to say on it.
Can I? No. I'll give you an example. It's like one actress or actor playing multiple roles. And then you love them for that role.
No, but there's got to be a connection. There's got to be. I mean, this is it. Like, I'll say this is one of the gaps. There has to be a connection with Azu and Izu. There has to be.
Agreed that there has to be that.
But again, they didn't do anything with it.
Agreed. But what I would say is, I did not find that connection. And what I mean by that is,
there was no given connection for it.
What?
There was no given connection for it.
No, as in, I did not feel anything for Az. I did not give two craps about Az.
No, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions.
You might have.
Oh, I do. But anyway, so so to finish off, would you recommend Kamen Rider 01?
You first.
Right, I would say this is quite a tough one because actually it's it's a good first rate one, and there's a lot of good going on, but I think there's a lot of tropes that are pre-established in Rider lore. That I mean, I'm not necessarily saying they have to do what I did and watch all previous 29 series, but I don't know. Like, I I think it's probably one that they could leave a little further in after someone's known rider. But yeah, it's definitely a good series, definitely a good watch. I mean, someone's already watched a few rider series and yeah, jump straight in. But as a first, that's a tough one.
What I would say is, as a rider fan, yes. As a first watch, I'm almost inclined to say yes. And the reason I say that is because it's the start of a new generation. And I keep using this terminology again, but it's a fresh start. It's a new rider series. It's a new beginning, if you will. So you can almost go at this with, what's it? A new beginning, if you will. I feel you could almost have someone new go at this. Like, and I know this isn't a good comparison, but like, bear with me. It's not like saying I would recommend, say, Gokaiger to anyone. Like, I would recommend Gokaiger for anyone that wanted to start watching Sentai, because that covers almost all bases, if you will, just for the sheer fun of it.
Even though we're wrapping this up, because I actually did forget to mention this myself, but would you compare the final fight from 01 to the final fight at Gokaiger?
No way near.
No, because I did get Gokaiger vibes from the final. There's the fundamental difference.
No way near. If anything...
No, because you had like all the different weapons, didn't you?
No, stop. What I would say is, I think the final fight, the beginning of the final fight of 01 is almost like the beginning of decade.
I can see that, but I wouldn't have necessarily... I mean, I'd even say the final fight of 01 is also like some of the fights they did in Build, like when they were fighting on top of the monolith and that, like when it was...
See, the problem...
Build versus Greece and stuff.
Right, the problem with Build is, and I've mentioned this before, that series was so forgetful that I don't even remember it.
It's only for... I mean, in my opinion, well, I mean, bear in mind we've not even reviewed Build yet, but the one thing I'll say about Build is it's got so much going on that so much becomes forgetful. That's just my opinion of it.
Anywho, at the end
anyway,
of the day,
so talking about recommending Kamen Rider 01 still, so go on.
My thoughts. I love 01. Would I recommend it? Yes. As a whole, yes. To a fan of Master Rider, yes. To a first rider, what is that? As a first rider watch, yes.
Okay, that's some very strong yeses you've given there.
I would, because I just feel that you can watch this and have fun with it, and the fact that there's not as much stupid CGI going on, and the fact that you have more...
but obviously it's less poignant. I'll even say as much, just to interject.
Let me hang on. What I was going to say was what carries the series, what, you know, is consistent, is the chemistry of Aruto and Izu, and also the character development as well. Everything else is secondary. That's what I was trying to get.
I will say that when it comes to CGI, the CGI is actually really good and somewhat like very well rendered, I'll say.
Except for Mammoth.
Well, what are you gonna do? So anyway, so that's us wrapping up a very long Toku series review of Kamen Rider 01. I hope you enjoyed. Please comment, like, follow, and subscribe. So we've got my boy, the Winter Cosplayer. You can find him on Facebook and Instagram. And then there's us, the Toku Bros, at this very YouTube channel, as well as Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Toku Bros 71. And then finally myself, RyuKiva Toku, where I can be found on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, and my WordPress site, ryukivatoku.wordpress.com. So where we've been talking about the series that has just wrapped up, that is Kamen Rider 01. I will be adding Kamen Rider 01 to the chart of my tokusatsu chart rundown. I'll be doing Kamen Rider in week 3. Next week on my channel, I will be talking about Super Sentai, so I'll be ranking from 38 all the way to number 1 during the week, Power Rangers the week after, and then Kamen Rider. So, that has been me, RyuKiva Toku, and that's him, Winter Cosplayer, because Aruto-jan Naito!